your mindset today. So let's dive in.
This is Dr. Noah St. John. Welcome to Take Back Your Mind, brother.
Thank you, Michael. It is such an honor to be here with you.
Listen, you've written 25 books.
Yes, sir.
You've impacted a lot of folks. Listen, give us a little bit of your backstory as to, what inspired you, to do what you do. What is the origin story behind Noah St. John?
It started very organically. I grew up poor in a rich neighborhood. And I know that's a total cliche, but
Yeah.
it's totally true. I grew up in this little town called Kennebunkport, Maine, which is one of the wealthiest communities in New England. In fact, one of the wealthiest communities in the entire nation. But my
Kennebunk?
family was dirt poor.
Uh-huh.
And I mean that literally because we lived at the bottom of a dirt road in a drafty, unfinished house that my parents ended up losing to foreclosure when I was just 15 years old. So from a very young age, I was painfully exposed to the gap, the chasm between the haves and the have-nots. The haves was everyone else in the community. The have-nots was my family. And I'm sure we've all heard speakers get up on stage and they'll say things like, well, we were poor, but we were happy. We didn't know we were poor. Well, I'll tell you what, in my family, we freaking knew we were poor.
You couldn't deny that experience.
Well, because my mother, bless her heart, reminded us every day that we were poor and miserable. So no one wasn't happy, it sucked. And so from a very young age, I said I hated being poor. I mean, I just hated that experience of poverty, fear, lack, and not enoughness. That's what I grew up with in my family. But I saw that right down the street, there's great wealth and abundance.
Right.
So I said, how the heck do I get from here to there? And of course, there was no one to help me back then. There was no internet or all the things we have today. So I did the only thing that I could think of. And I went to the local library and I read every book in the self-help section. I just immersed myself in the spirit, the self-help literature, all the classics, Dale Carnegie, Napoleon Hill, Stephen Covey, right? I read every book and I really, really tried to make it work. But as hard as I tried, as hard as I was hustling and grinding, I just couldn't seem to make it work. And so at the age of 25, I was actually living in Los Angeles and I made a decision at that time to take my own life, to commit suicide at age 25. Now, at the very last moment, my life was spared, but I didn't know why. And I realized I've got to find, what am I doing on this planet? What am I doing here? What is my purpose on Earth? Right? All these questions that humans have been asking for centuries, right?
Right.
And so I did the only thing that I thought of, and I went back to the library. And this time I read every book in the spiritual section. And I immersed myself in the spiritual thinkers of our time. Now, this is a story that I don't normally tell on podcasts, but you and I, Michael, have a very distinct history that you don't know. And that is, I was actually living in North Hollywood at that time, right? When I decided to commit suicide and at the last moment, my life was spared, I discovered the North Hollywood Church of Religious Science with Reverend Mark Vieira, who I know you know.
One of my students.
Exactly. And I remember this distinctly when you came and you spoke at Reverend Mark's ordination.
Wow.
And the place was packed. I don't know if you remember this. This was in 1992.
Yes.
And so what's that? 30 years ago, 30 plus years ago.
Wow.
And I remember I was sitting way in the back. I mean, you couldn't get a seat at this place because you were going to be there. And I remember sitting in the back of the room, listening to you speak, because now Reverend Mark, I'd been going there for several months, and I was studying the works of Ernest Holmes and Science of Mind. And I said, wow, it really changed my life, because I remember walking into that church. Now, just pause for 1 second. I grew up Catholic, right? So was my experience of God. My experience of God was God didn't like me. I was a sinner. Nothing I did was ever good enough. And I was just nothing. And more importantly, I was very separate from God.
Right.
That was what I learned growing up. And so when Reverend Mark said, there's no spot where God is not, and God is right where you are, I'm like, what? No, God doesn't like me. What? And I mean, when I first walked into that church in 1992, I was like hunched over. I had zero self-esteem, no self-worth. I couldn't look people in the eye. And
Mm.
after
Mm.
studying the works of Dr. Ernest Holmes, that's when I started to get it that wait a minute, if God is, then God must be all that is. You can't have God and something else. That doesn't make any sense.
Absolutely.
And then I said, well, wait a minute. If God is all that is, then I must be one with God.
Right.
That's just math right there. It's just math. And so fast forward to Reverend Mark's ordination, and you spoke. And I remember I was sitting way in the back, up in the balcony, and I said, this man is the greatest speaker I have ever heard in my life.
Wow.
Reverend Michael Beckwith. And I was like, I mean, the whole place was just blown away by you. And like I just said, I waited to tell you that story. I've been waiting for 30 years to tell you that story. And here we are 30 years later, my man. And it's like, wow,
Oh
I'm
my
on your
God.
show. You absolutely changed my life over 30 years ago, you and Reverend Mark. I mean, but I
Wow.
mean, you only spoke that one time. I only heard you that one time. And you left an indelible impression on my brain. And I've been waiting for 30 years to tell you, thank you for changing my life.
God bless you. Thank you. Thank you for that story. Mark used to be, Mark is retired now,
Yeah, I figured.
but Mark used to be my caterer when I would have workshops in my living room.
Wow.
He would be listening as he was cooking the food in the kitchen.
I didn't
He'd
know
be
that.
listening to what I would be teaching in my living room.
Wow. Wow.
And eventually he segued into the
Mm,
teaching,
mm,
became a practitioner,
mhm.
then became a minister.
Right?
And then I can remember he was assistant minister up in San Jose, I think it was.
Uh-huh.
And there was some issues that happened around that. And the minister was kind of jealous of him because the community really loved him.
Right.
And I was like the vice president of a particular district. And the people that I was working with, they wanted to kick Mark out. And I said, oh, no. I said,
Oh,
Mark has to fly down here so he can tell his story, his side
mm,
of the story.
right.
Anyway, when he came down, everybody got to a great understanding that minister was just jealous,
Mm,
that Mark wasn't doing anything wrong.
right.
Subsequently, he left that particular community and went to North Hollywood.
Hmm.
And so we have a long history.
Wow.
And
Wow.
he had a great career. I was always just proud of him
Yes.
and for his teachings and his ability to communicate and his loving heart and his community
Yes.
activism. He's a beautiful, beautiful man. So
Yes.
thank you for bringing that back into my awareness.
I've actually never shared that story in public before. I've talked about you many times that you're the greatest speaker I've ever heard. I mean, and that is
Wow.
absolutely true. I've said that to many people. I said, wow. So I remember when I saw you in The Secret, I'm like, aha, there he is.
There
It
he is
should
again.
have him. I was like, yeah, man. I was so excited and so
Noah
happy.
St. John, we are connected, man. I didn't
Yes.
but listen, now I know. You knew, I didn't know.
That's what I'm saying. I know. I'm finally, I'm glad we're finally here and actually connected. So it is truly an honor. You don't know how thrilled I am today to finally be able to share that story with you.
That is fantastic. That's fantastic. Well, listen, you've incorporated so much in your teachings. I mean, obviously, you went through all of the best teachers of New Thought, Ageless Wisdom, all of the spiritual literature. You embodied a lot of it. You've written 25 books. What was your motivation to write this latest book, The Seven-Figure Expert?
Well, so just to finish the story, if I
Oh, yeah,
may.
please. No, I don't
So
want to interrupt the story.
after hearing you and Reverend Mark, I actually was praying to God every day, which I had not done for years. I mean, I felt so separate from God.
Right.
And I was praying. I was living in North Hollywood in a little apartment. My girlfriend had left me. I had no money. It was like a country song, but it
Right,
was
right.
it was real. It was real. I was going through it.
Everything
And
was
so I was
gone,
praying.
even the truck.
Right, the truck was gone. Right. Anyway, so I was praying to God, and I said, "What do you want me to do? What am I supposed to do here?" And I heard this voice, exactly like conversations with God, by the way, which happened later. But and it said, "Move back to Maine." And I'm like, what?
Mhm.
What are you nuts? Right. And the voice wouldn't shut up. It wouldn't stop.
Mm.
And now at that point, I was estranged from my family. I really hadn't, I mean, I talked to them a couple times a year. So
Right.
notice that I moved across the entire continent, right there in Maine. I'm in California. That was not an accident. So the voice saying, move back to Maine, I'm like, are you insane? But it just wouldn't shut up. So
Insane to move back to Maine.
examine, and so I said, okay, all right, fine. So I called up my parents. I said, this is really weird, but I think I'm supposed to move back to Maine. And they're, of course, my mom, she was crying. She was like, yes, and so I moved back to Maine. I sold all my belongings in LA, which was not much anyway. So I moved back to Maine, and then I decided to actually go back to college at the age of 28. I'd
Hmm.
gone to college the first time at 17. I skipped eighth grade and graduated a year early. So now I went to school 10 years later. And that's when I was in school studying religious studies.
Mm,
Well, in 1997, I had these epiphanies and I realized exactly what was missing in all those books that I spent all those years reading. And
mm,
I realized this was my mission. This was my message that was given to me. And so that's when I actually published my first book, which was entitled Permission to Succeed, which is right there, you can see. And it
mhm.
was actually subsequently published by the Chicken Soup for the Soul publisher.
Right.
And so now with this new book called The Seven Figure Expert, I realized that this is something that I've been helping people do for many, many years now is building 6 and 7 and even 8 figure businesses. And
Mhm.
but I didn't have a book about it. I said, wow, well, why don't you write a book about all these things that you've done and that you've helped people with and helping them to actually build a 7 figure business. Now, the reason that I call it the 7 figure expert is because I realized that one of the biggest hurdles that many entrepreneurs have is getting to that 7 figure level. Now, of course, the first hurdle is getting to the 6 figure level, right? That's
Right,
a big
right,
hurdle
right.
for a lot of entrepreneurs and people who want to quit their job and start their online business or things like that. But of course, the next hurdle is let's get to that 7 figure. So I realized that I've been teaching people this in my coaching, right? I have one-on-one coaching and group coaching, like you mentioned a moment ago, in your introduction, the 12-week breakthrough. That's one of my coaching programs where I actually do help people make more in just 12 weeks than in the previous 12 months.
Mm.
And so, but like I said, I hadn't written a book about it. So I said, why don't you write a book, Noah, help people and just show them your 7 figure expert formula. So really that's what it's about. It's about what I've, and in the book, by the way, there's just dozens of case studies and stories of real people, real stories who have gone through my training and who I've helped to build multiple 6 and 7 and even 8 figure businesses. So that's really the impetus, and that's what the 7 figure expert book is all about.
Right. So basically, you're saying that you were already doing this in terms of your coaching, but you've
Yes.
never written a book about it.
That's right. That's
Yeah,
right. Because I've been writing books about the inner game, right? The inner game of success, which, as you and I both know, is 90% of success, right? Is up here in the inner game.
absolutely.
But I hadn't actually written like a book of how to make money online, which is something that I've been doing for 30 years now. And so that's really what it was about saying, well, I help people. I've helped so many people with their inner game. Let's help people with their outer game now. And that really is what the 7 figure expert book is all about.
Well, how does your method differ from, a lot of people are out here how to hustle. They want to
Mhm.
hustle and make it happen. What's the difference between your method and this the basic hustle?
Mhm. Well, that's what I call the hustle bros, right? The hustle bros, you see them everywhere on social media. You
Yeah, yeah,
can't
yeah,
go
yeah.
on social media without seeing these guys, and they've got the Lambos and all this stuff. And they're like, the hustle and grind, you got to be working 18, 20 hours a day and, keep your nose to grindstone. And if you're not working on Christmas Eve, you're a loser, stuff like that. And it's like, dude, first of all, time out. All right. Let's really look at what you're saying here. So if your entire strategy for success is hustle and grind, work
Mhm.
18, 20 hours a day, that's not really a strategy. That's just basically a recipe for an early grave.
Burnout. Yeah.
Burnout, exactly. And
Mhm.
so I really wanted to actually consciously provide a counterpoint to those guys, the hustle bros, because they're so loud. they're taking up all the air in the room. And I wanted to show people that listen, there's nothing wrong with hard work. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that
Right.
hard work is bad or wrong or something. That's not the point. We all look, especially like let's say you're starting up your business and you're in startup mode. Hey, you got to work hard, right? You got to do the work. You got to put in those hours. You're the chief bottle washer. You're doing everything. You got every hat on, marketing, sales, whatever, right? And there's a point of that you have to do that. But then after a while, you really get to a point in your business, hopefully, where you're like, geez, I'm wearing every hat. Maybe it's time for me to take off some of these hats, right? And hire some other folks who can do what I do, or maybe even better, right? In
Right.
this particular way. So the seven figure expert formula, really, my seven figure expert formula is really about that. It is about bringing back that balance, that work life balance that, frankly, every entrepreneur craves. Because if you think about it, why did you start a business? Right?
Hmm.
Was it to work 18, 20 hours a day and never see your family? Never go
Right.
on vacation, never enjoy life? That doesn't make any sense, right? That
Right.
literally makes no sense when you think about it. So it really is, my seven figure expert formula is really about bringing, I mean, the way I see it is bringing sanity back to this entire argument and this entire process of being a business owner, being an entrepreneur, and being an expert.
Right. So you're assisting people in balancing the productivity with well-being, with
That's
wellness.
right.
There's a balance there. You can't have you want to have both. And so what
Indeed,
is
absolutely. Exactly.
uh
And it's not just about, saying, well, I'm going to take more time off. Well, then for many people, that means their income's going to go down. It's like, okay, I'll just stop. Well, no, you've got to put these systems in place. There's an old saying that we don't rise to the level of our goals, we fall to the level of our systems. And
hmm
that's really what the seven figure expert formula is about. It's about putting the right systems in place so that the business can work hard for you without you having to work so hard for your business.
hmm So when you're working with these people, obviously you now have it in a book. When you work with these
Mhm.
people, you actually assist them in setting up the system that works for their particular business. And
Well,
so
yeah, I mean, every business, of course, is different and unique, but yet every business really has the same systems. You
right.
know what I mean? And they're in my seven figure expert formula. There's the five distinct stages of the seven figure expert formula that really every business has to have. However, within that, everything is very customized and personalized with what we do. What I do in my one on one coaching or my group coaching, it's a very customized and personalized approach. So the way that I liken it, it's like building a house, right?
Mhm.
So let's say you want to build your dream home, and you go to the architect, and the architect says, okay, well, we're going to give you a 5 bedroom home and a 3 car garage, and it's going to have a pool in the back. And you're like, well, wait a minute, that's not what I want. I only need 3 bedrooms. I don't need 5 bed. Well, we only do one kind of house, and this is the kind of house we're going to give you. It's like, okay, you probably wouldn't go to that architect, right? So what I do is, I've built thousands of houses, to use that analogy, right? I've helped thousands of people, build their dream business, their dream home, right? So what I do is I say, listen, here's the basic framework of a house, right? Of a business. But within that, it's your house, right? It's got to be your dream. It's not my dream or somebody else's dream. It's got to be your dream. And a lot of people, ironically, they actually don't even know what that is yet. They're like, gee, I never thought of that before. And so even just that part can be a big light bulb moment for a lot of people.
So you flesh out the dream, you have
Mhm.
them articulated,
Mhm.
and once they articulate the dream, then you build the system, or
Exactly.
you help build the system.
That's right.
And you
Exactly
said there
right.
was 5 parts to that system.
Yes.
And what are those 5 parts?
So when you right in the Seven Figure Expert book, I walk you through all 5 stages. So it's I love diagrams. I'm such a nerd that I love diagrams and visual aids, because we humans work in visual aids, right? We think in pictures, right?
Yeah,
In
right, right.
movies. And so this is really the seven figure flywheel, the seven figure expert formula. So we start with seven figure beliefs, right? So
Mhm.
everything starts, as I mentioned a moment ago, with your inner game, right? Your inner game is literally 90% of your success. So
Yes.
many people just very simply don't think they can do it. It's just that simple. They're like, then they even hear seven figure expert, like, well, I could never do that. And then I go, okay, you're right. I mean, if that's what you're saying, then
Whatever
yeah,
you
you're right. You
believe,
won't do it.
you'll prove it to yourself.
Exactly. Exactly. So that's why we start there. Now, by the way, just for the folks listening, I want people to notice that just right there is totally different from what the marketing gurus are doing.
Mhm.
Because the marketing gurus, what they do is they start on page one with, all right, here's how we're gonna, make a lot of money. Here's how we're gonna build your list. Here's how we're gonna whatever. And they totally ignore the fact that we're dealing with human beings.
Mhm.
Last time I checked, most business owners are human beings. Interesting, right? And most human beings have a lot of what I call head trash, right? The
Mhm.
voice in their head
Right,
that says,
right,
I can't do it because.
Right.
Well, no, that sounds great, but I don't think I can do it. I don't have the time. I don't have the money. I can't afford it. I've tried before and it didn't work. I've failed so many times. You see what they're doing? They're literally psyching themselves out before we even got started.
Right.
So on page one, you're already done.
Right. You're through.
So what I do on my page one is, hey guys, let's talk about being human. Let's talk about the fact that you're probably psyching yourself out before we even said go. Right. So that's why we start with 7-figure beliefs. Okay. And by the way, just so folks are aware of this, it doesn't matter to me how much money you make. It doesn't matter to me what kind of car you drive. It doesn't matter to me where you live or anything like that. Those are very personal issues. And they're things that really require a lot of, I think, introspection for each of us, right? But there are so many people in this industry, the guru industry, and they're saying, listen, I did it this way, so you should do it the way I did it.
Absolutely.
You've seen this a million times, right? In
Absolutely.
fact, there's that old saying, right? To he who's good with a hammer, all the world is a nail.
Right.
And so they're saying, well, I made $1 million using Facebook ads, so you should do Facebook ads. Okay, well, I'm not saying there's something wrong with Facebook ads, but is that really what made their success? Not really, no. There are so many layers and layers and layers that person may not even be aware of consciously.
Right.
And so they're teaching you something that isn't necessarily wrong, but they're starting on page 273.
Right.
It's like, whoa. We got to back up the truck here, guys.
Right. Right.
Let's
Absolutely.
get back to who am I and what do I want? So
Yes.
that's part of the 7-figure belief, formula. And that's why we start there, because we have to start there.
In this formula belief, you assist people moving from scarcity mindset to a more of an abundance mindset. That has to be a part of what the dynamic that you do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and see, that's one of the reasons I shared my story earlier, because I want people to know I came from scarcity. I came from not enoughness. So all of this inner work that I've done for decades, reading every book out there and really, really working hard on myself, my job now is to save people those decades. So you don't have to read the 500 books that I did. You don't have to go through the 30 years of pain, torment, and agony that I did. I mean, you could if you wanted to, but why?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's an old saying that a smart person learns from their own mistakes, but a wise person learns from other people's mistakes.
Absolutely.
Right. And so I've made every mistake in the book, believe me, including and right up to going to take my own life. So you can't get much further low self-esteem than that. So
Absolutely.
that is my mission and my job now, is to save people all that pain, torment, and agony that I had to go through. I mean, I've got all the arrows in my back to prove it,
Right.
So
Right.
anyway, that's a big part of this, going from scarcity to abundance. And that's why I do want people to realize that I'm speaking from very, very personal, painful experience, not some, ivory tower saying, "Oh, I'm pretty sure this worked because I read it in the book." No,
Right.
I freaking lived it.
Right. You're not an academician up on the tower. You're actually an individual who's lived this and
Correct.
had to shift your perspective from the
That's right.
poverty mentality
That's right.
that you had a direct experience of into actually filling yourself up with an awareness of abundance,
That's right.
abundance of opportunities, abundance of prosperity, all of that. That was a dynamic inner work that you did.
Precisely.
And so there's a law of attraction play into this, and when you're working with these people, I don't want to forget the other 4 dimensions
Right.
of the wheel here.
Right. Well, remember that beliefs is like 90% of it. In fact,
Right.
let me tell you a quick story that illustrates this very point. I was speaking at a seminar in Los Angeles just a few years ago. I was speaking to about 1,000 entrepreneurs. These are 7- and 8-figure business owners, very successful people, right? Big room of successful business owners. I just finished speaking, and a man came out of the audience, came up to me, and he said, "Noah, I want to hire you as my coach. You are the coach that I've been looking for." Now, I didn't know this man from Adam. Ironically, his name was Adam.
Adam.
True story. And so I said, "Okay, what's going on?" He said, "Noah, I own this business, and we are at 7 figures, and we have been stuck at the same level for the past 4 years. We just have plateaued, and we can't break through that income ceiling." Because one of the things I talk about is the income ceiling, right? You just keep hitting that ceiling, no matter how hard you hustle and grind. You just keep hitting that ceiling.
Hmm.
And he said, Noah, as soon as I heard you speak about, head trash and income ceiling and foot on the brake and everything you just said, inner game, outer game, everything you said, he said, I knew that you were the coach I've been looking for. Oh, and by the way, he said that he spent so much money. He spent tens of thousands of dollars going to all the marketing gurus, all those guys out there, and they still couldn't break that ceiling. He said, as soon as I heard you speak, he said, I knew you were the coach I've been looking for. So he decided to hire me on the spot. Now, that's why I love working with high achievers, right? Because they make decisions quickly and friendly. They don't dilly
Right,
dally, don't
right,
mess
right,
around. They
right.
just, let's do it. So I coached him and his leadership team for 18 months. In that 18 months, we were able to get his company that had been stuck, plateaued for the past 4 years, to over 20 million in revenue.
Hmm. Mm.
600% growth. And
Mm.
by the way, you can watch his video, Adam's video, and many, many others on my website. So what's the point of the story? The point of the story is 95% of the work we did was inner game. Inner game,
Right.
the beliefs that I'm talking about,
You shifted consciousness.
precisely,
Yeah.
exactly. Yes. And remember, he'd already tried everything. He'd already spent tens of thousands of dollars on all this marketing stuff. And what's interesting is he was able to get to that 7-figure level really with no one helping him with his inner game. That's pretty impressive. But yet
Hmm.
he couldn't scale up until I showed him how to actually master his inner game, using my 7-figure expert method. And for him, it became 8 figures.
That's fantastic. And
Yeah,
so you mentioned earlier about a lot of these people who are very successful have unconscious habits
that's right.
that they're doing that I guess you've teased out and placed in your book to a degree.
That,
What are
that's
some
right.
what are those? What are some of those unconscious habits that these
Well, all right.
people
So
have?
I'm gonna hold up one of my books here. It's called Power Habits. Now, this is one of my foundational books called Power Habits, and you can get this at powerhabitsbook.com.
Hmm.
So, for those of you watching at home, so this is my Power Habit system. It's right here on page 100, if you can see that. So, what
Hmm.
I did was, I mentioned a moment ago, that I was studying all these books. I read every book out there. And what I realized over time is that they're talking about conscious habits, right? So as an example, let's take a seminal work, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, right? A
Right.
seminal work, Stephen Covey, he's, one of my heroes. I actually got to interview him before he passed away. He's an amazing man. He was one of my inspirations for getting this business.
Hmm.
But what's interesting about the 7 habits is that they're all conscious habits, right? Be proactive, think win-win, and so on, right? They're all perfect and wonderful. Here's the problem. The problem is that I've interviewed so many highly successful people. And what I realized over many, many years is that they're doing unconscious habits that they don't even know they're doing, number one. And therefore, number two, they can never tell you what they're doing
Hmm.
because they're unconscious.
Right.
So it's like driving a car, right? This is one of the things that I talk about, like in my keynote presentations or my seminars. I'll say, how many people here know how to drive a car? Of course, everybody puts their hand up, right? I said, did you know that you actually had to go through 4 stages of competency before you knew how to drive a car? And they're like, what do you mean? I said, okay, well, there's 4 stages of competency. Whenever we humans want to master a new habit or new skill, we go through 4 stages. The first stage is unconscious incompetence. That means
Right.
you don't know you don't know.
Right.
The second stage is conscious incompetence. That means you don't know. The third stage is conscious competence, which is you know. And then the final stage is unconscious competence, which is you do without thinking,
Right.
right? So when you actually did all of those stages to drive a car, first you didn't know how to drive a car. Then you realized, wait, I don't know how to drive a car. And then
Right.
you said, man, I need to learn how to drive a car. You learn how to drive a car. And now, of course, today, for most of the folks listening, you're actually doing this thing that was really hard before. And now you're doing it without even thinking. You're thinking of 27 other things, but not that thing.
Right.
So what I realized is that it is exactly the same with success. That highly successful people, the 1%ers, are actually doing habits that are unconscious. Therefore, they don't even know that you could interview them all day long. Another example, Think and Grow Rich, right? We've all read that book. I'm sure 30 million people have read it, heard of it. And what happened? Napoleon Hill, right? 100 years ago, he interviewed all these highly successful people. Hey, how'd you become successful? Well, I did this, and this. Okay, great. Put it in the book. How come so many people read that book and not everyone's successful? Because of
Hmm.
all the things he didn't say, they didn't say,
Hmm.
all the things they weren't even aware of. So that's why many people say about my work that my work starts where Stephen Covey's and Napoleon Hill's left off.
Right. And again, you're talking about a state of consciousness. Now,
Well, I'm talking about unconscious habits.
yes,
That's
right.
why
But it's
the
it's so
title.
integrated within them that it's active, but it's not necessarily conscious, but it's
I-
active.
I'll
Yeah.
give you an example. A lot of times I'll interview a successful person and I'll say, by the way, did you ever notice you did this and this? And they're like, yeah, you're right. I did do that. I never thought of that before.
Hmm.
Boom. What did I just prove? You're unconscious. You're unconscious. You didn't even know you were doing the thing you're absolutely doing. Right. So I could have interviewed you all day long and said, so how do you, well, set your goals and work hard and think positive. No kidding. We've heard that a million times. Right. So
Right, right, right,
what
right.
actually is it that separates? And that's one of the things, going back to Adam, that example I told you about, that was exactly the point. I walked him through my power habit system and he was like, holy cow, I didn't know I was doing this. And I didn't know, nobody ever told me this stuff. I'm like, no kidding. Why do you think it took me 30 years and all this money and all this pain and torment to figure it out? Right. So that's a big, big part of the work that I've been doing for the last 30 years. And that's one of the reasons we get that hockey stick growth for our clients.
Right, right. You talk a lot about, you mentioned it twice, head trash.
Mm-hmm.
These are all the mental concepts and beliefs that prevent someone to going to the next level, so to speak. And so you help tease that out of some people. Is that what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a huge part of it. So
Hmm.
think about this. For everyone listening to this program right now, I want you to think about your goals, right? Because we've all heard you got to set your goals. We've heard that a million times, right? Everybody talks about it. And guess what? That's not wrong, right? Because we humans are goal-oriented organisms. We're always thinking about what do I want, right? We're always thinking about what do we want, whether it's a new house, a new car, a new job, or a ham sandwich for lunch. I mean, we're always thinking about what's the next thing that I want. And so we're goal oriented organisms. But here's the thing that people don't talk about and that people don't realize is that what happens after you set that goal, right? And so, like I was talking about earlier, a big goal for many people is make more money. No doubt, right? Of course it is, right? And so, whether you're in business right now or whether you're thinking about starting a business or you're in a job, it doesn't matter. You want that promotion. You want to make more money. You want to provide for your family. You want all of these things. And that's all perfectly right. But here's what happens. Let's say you own a business. And you say, Noah, I want to make an extra $10,000 a month in my business, right? That's a great goal. That's a common goal. If you're at 10,000 a month, that means 6 figures a year. Hey, that's a lot of money. I mean, that's life-changing money for most people, right? I mean, you're talking paying off your mortgage early, sending your kids to a great college, living where you want, taking vacations when you want. I mean, that's life-changing money. Just $10,000, an extra $10,000 a month. But
Right.
here's what happens for so many people. No, I really want to make an extra 10,000 a month, but I can't do it. I've tried
Mm.
so many things. Oh, I don't have the time. I don't have the money. I can't afford it. I don't know who to talk to. I don't know where to get started. You see? And so that very thing is, in fact, the reason you're not going to do it
Right.
because you just told yourself why you can't do it. And here's the amazing thing, you're going to make yourself right. We humans have an infinite capacity to make ourselves right, right? So Henry
Absolutely.
Ford said many years ago, whether you believe you can or you can't, you're right. Now,
Right.
with all due respect to Mr. Ford, I updated that statement. And here's how I put it. Whether you believe you can or you believe you can't, you make yourself right.
Right.
You're going to make yourself right because it's easier to be right than actually question, wait a minute, what if that isn't right? What if that's not true?
Hmm.
And see, that's what I've done my whole life is saying, okay, I was raised in poverty and I hated it. So what about that do I need to fix? Do I need to change? Do I need to transform? Do I need to shift? And how the heck do I do that?
Hmm.
And that's
Hmm.
why do you think I've written 25 books? Because
Yeah,
I want the
25
answer to that
books.
question.
25 books. That's a lot. And you have power habits.
That's right.
So what have you noticed in terms of the culture, in terms of the evolution of this work harder, hustle? Uh, what has changed or has it changed?
Well, because of social media, we now elevate that. We think that, and frankly, we think that's the only way to do it because those guys, the hustle bros, are taking up all the air in the room.
Hmm.
And what's amazing about these gurus is they're great at self promotion. They're
Hmm.
fantastic self marketers. And they are like, hey, man, I hustle 9 grand and, look at my sports car, look at my jet, look at my helicopter, look at my yacht. Hey, man, nothing wrong with that. We all want nice things, right? There's nothing wrong with those things. But here's my argument and my question to those guys, those gurus. That's great that you've made all that money. Have you helped anyone else make any money? You know, and usually the answer is not so much,
Right,
right?
right.
Not so much. In fact, I gave them, because when I started my business in 1997, I mean, I had $800 to my name. I was living in a 300 square foot basement apartment in Hadley, Massachusetts. So I had nothing. I had,
Mm,
no business, no marketing, no sales skills, no business, acumen of any kind. But I had a mission, that mission to tell people about exactly what I had discovered after
mhm.
reading all those books, and no one was talking about it. I realized this was my mission. So I had nothing except that deep burning desire to help people, to make a difference. And
Right.
so I said, well, I got to learn how to run a business, how to make money. How the heck do you do that? I don't know. So I paid these guys tons of money, only to find out there's no there there. They 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 are great self promoters, but they suck at teaching. They can't teach their way on a paper bag. It's
Mhm,
like, okay, thanks, man. I gave you all this money. You told me nothing,
mhm.
nothing. And so I realized that, wait a minute, that is the point. They've made tons of money by selling stuff that is essentially a bunch of air. And
Mhm.
I said, wow, that really sucks. What? How is that a thing? And so going back to your question, how has the hustle mentality changed? I think it's gotten worse for
Mhm.
that very reason, because they're great self marketers, they are great self
Mm,
promoters,
mm, mm.
and they're essentially selling us this bill of goods. And that's essentially the only choice we have, we think, because
You-
they're so loud.
Right.
And
Now,
so that's a big part of my job, is to say, oh, by the way, there's another way we could possibly do this.
right. Yeah. It appears that what you're doing is you're actually assisting people just to shift their awareness, get the trash out of their head,
Yes.
to be able to have an inner talk that's
Right.
embracing abundance and prosperity, attaching it to a mission that's
Mhm.
higher than yourself, to be of service.
That's right.
And then what happens is, because you brought up a couple other points, is that people will say, here are the how-tos, but they're telling you how they did it, but they're not telling you who they were while they were doing it. So when a
And
person changes their
and
whole
they're not
mission,
aware of these unconscious
and they're
habits
not
at
aware of it.
all. At
Yeah.
all. They don't even know they exist.
So there's an old Zen statement that says,
Mhm.
the right person can do the wrong thing, but it'll turn out right. The wrong person can do the right thing, but it'll turn out wrong because they're not the right person, or they are the right person.
Got it.
So when you get this head trash out of these people's minds and they adopt an abundance consciousness, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera,
Mhm.
they're going to create their own how-to. It won't be exactly like somebody else. The
Right.
principles will be the same, but
Right.
they're going to create their own how-to. This is what you're bringing to the marketplace here.
That's right. I'll give you another great example of that, what you're talking about. So I was talking with another one of my clients named Charles, and I asked him a question I asked all of my students, all of my clients. Now, he'd been reading my books. He, read Power Habits. It's funny. He actually told me a story. He was in Barnes and Noble and he walked by my book 3 times, and
Mhm.
he said something called to him, and he said he just had to buy it, right? And so, isn't that great? I love that story.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he called me. He contacted me on my website. We had a breakthrough session, and I asked him a question I ask all my clients, whether it's one-on-one or group coaching. I said, Charles, how much do you think it's going to cost you over the next 12 months if we don't take out your head trash? How much do you think you're going to lose, or lose out on? Now, without batting an eye, he said $1 million. No, I'm easily going to lose out on $1 million if I don't get this fixed right now.
Mm.
And I said, Charles, that's very common. I hear this every day when I talk to people. They say, no, my head trash is costing me, half a million, $1 million, 2 million or more. And that's just in the next 12 months, right? It just keeps adding up if I don't fix it. So I
Mhm.
said, so number one, it's very common. Number two, I said, I tell you what, why don't you just give me 10% of that million and I will find you $1 million in the next 12 months. In other words,
Mhm.
if you give me $1 and I give you $10 back, is that a good deal? He goes, well,
Mhm.
yeah, that's a good deal. And he said, okay, let's do it. So he actually decided to hire me. He paid me 10% of a million, which is 100K, right?
Mhm.
That's not nothing.
Right.
But so I coached him one-on-one for a year. And as it turns out, I didn't find him $1 million in the next 12 months. Instead, I found him 1.8 million in just 10 months. He said, with all this new money, that you helped me make, I bought a new RV. My wife and I were driving around the country for 7 weeks. He said, I've never been able to take this much time off. He said, so now not only do I have more money than I've ever had before, I now have more time than I've ever had before. So he said, thank you for changing my life. So that's how powerful these habits are.
Right. So basically, what you did was how did you meet with him weekly or monthly or what?
Yes, weekly. And
Uh-huh.
just over Zoom, just like we're talking right now. So that's the nice thing is it could be anywhere on planet Earth. It's
Yeah.
all virtual, and that's really nice.
So you were his business practitioner
Yes,
every single week.
that's right.
And
That's right. But
I
more
I
importantly,
like the phrase taking out the head trash.
that's right.
You
That's
dumping
really,
it.
and just like Adam,
Yeah,
90% of what we did was inner game.
right.
90% of what is holding people back is inner game. They think, oh, I need the next shiny object. I need the next marketing thing. I need the next whatever. And none of those things are bad or wrong. It's just when people don't look within, they're missing 90% of success.
Absolutely. No, that's powerful. You're speaking my language and you're speaking it more of you're speaking in a business context, which
Hmm.
is extremely important. So
Yes,
basically, then you also assist these individuals to have a much higher purpose than making money.
that's right.
In which is extremely important because you have to be here to be of some level of service to a higher order of being, and then that provides also the context to break through the into the abundance realm.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm still thinking about your 25 books.
What are you thinking about?
Well, obviously, every single book has a different strategy or a different focus, I should say.
Yes, correct.
You
Right.
know, so your power habits has a particular focus in terms of how to develop certain habits.
That's right.
And then your latest book about the seven figure
Hmm.
probably has some things that you did in power habits, but
Right.
you probably have some level of nuance that's a little bit different.
Well, you're absolutely right, Michael, that yes, every one of my books, of course, has a different focus. So for the seven figure expert book, I'll just hold that up so you can see it.
Yeah,
And it
right.
is, oh, by the way, for everyone listening to this program, you can get this book for free. I wanted to make sure we mentioned that. And if you
Please.
just go to sevenfigureexpertbook.com, very easy to remember, sevenfigureexpertbook.com. Because you're listening to this program, I've covered the cost of the book. We just ask you to cover the shipping. And by the
Hmm.
way, you also get over $700 of free bonus gifts when you go to sevenfigureexpertbook.com and get the book. The book is free,
Outstanding.
just cover the shipping.
Outstanding.
So for the Seven Figure Expert book, what I did was, as I mentioned, I expanded it to a more business focus. Power Habits is essentially completely inner game focused. Well, with Seven Figure Expert, I put inner game and outer game together.
Hmm.
Right? And so that's my other favorite Venn diagram, right? You have inner game over here and outer game over there. Boom, you put them together. That's where you have the phenomenon called success. And frankly, it's only then that you have the phenomenon called success. So these highly successful people that we all know and love and that we, look up to, they're actually doing what I'm teaching, but they can't teach you. That's why I took the nerdiest nerd in the industry. That would be me. Right? I had to study these guys under a microscope and find out what they didn't say. How hard do
Right,
you think that was? Yeah, it was
right,
freaking hard.
right, right. So you took Napoleon Hill's work to another level.
That's right.
He gave you
That's
the
right.
whole external things that you had. He gave you some inner stuff as well, in terms of your belief, in terms of
Yeah.
understanding the law, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
But you've gone into a deeper, nuanced awareness of the inner game, which is the activation of that kind of consciousness. Yeah, I see. Yeah,
That's
it's
right.
very good. Yeah.
Well, I'm such a nerd. See, Think and Grow Rich really annoyed me
Hmm.
because it basically said a bunch of things, and I finished the book. I'm like, well, what am I supposed to do now? You,
Right.
you didn't tell me anything, right? You didn't say do this, do this. Now maybe I missed it,
Hmm.
but I'm such a nerd. I'm like, just give me a checklist,
Hmm.
Napoleon. What am I supposed to do here, man? And there wasn't one, so I had to make it myself. So that's why. And people, I'll give you another great example of this. I
Hmm.
was working with another client. Her name's Tamisa, a business owner in Arizona. Very vibrant. She's got a great personality. Just really great person. And she is a recovered seminar junkie. That's her description of herself. You can watch her video. It's on my website. But she's a recovered seminar junkie. She's going to all these seminars, right? And she built a six-figure business, doing well, but still couldn't break through that income ceiling, right? So a friend actually referred her to me. A friend recommended me to her, and or anyway, her to me. And so she joined my 12-week breakthrough program. And in 2 weeks, the first 2 weeks of coaching with me, she tripled her investment in just
Hmm.
2 weeks. And we hadn't even gotten to the money part yet.
Hmm.
We were just talking about these power habits. And so she tripled her investment in 2 weeks. Imagine that. I mean, imagine when you invest in a program, whether it's a book or a coaching program or online program, and you're like, geez, I don't know if I'm going to make my money back. That's a big fear and concern, which is very valid, right? You're like, geez, should I spend this money? Should I not? Whatever. And so, the fact is that what she said to me was that because she'd been going to all these seminars for years, right? And everybody was saying the same thing: set your goals, work hard, think positive. Okay, no kidding. We all know that stuff, right? That's not helping, right? It's like saying to someone who wants to lose weight, okay, go ahead and lose weight, eat right and exercise. Really? I never thought of that. No kidding. Right. So anyway, she was let's just say she was very, very thrilled with that result.
So to a burgeoning entrepreneur right now,
Mm-hmm.
what would you say to them in terms of basically, we got to take out the head trash. Absolutely. They got to stop. They have
Absolutely.
to stop. They have to stop driving their car with their brakes on by their
Exactly.
beliefs and their inner talk.
Right.
What would be the next thing? What would be the next thing that you would place in
So
there?
yeah, so we're talking about the five
Yeah.
phases of my seven-figure expert formula. So seven-figure beliefs. Then next is seven-figure habits, which we've talked
Mhm.
about. So that's my power habits, right? You got to
Mhm.
install those. And then so the third phase is seven-figure offers, right? So now we're transitioning from inner game to outer game. Okay. So an
Mhm.
offer is very simply how you make money, right?
Mhm.
I mean, every successful business starts with one successful offer, right?
Right.
That's how Amazon started. That's how Google started. That's how Microsoft. I mean, any business you want, that's how they started with one successful offer. The problem is a lot of entrepreneurs are not clear on their offers, and
Mhm.
nobody's told them how to get clear on their offers,
Mhm.
right? So here's another great example. I have a lot of students who come to me and they'll say, "Well, Noah, I spent all this money on Facebook ads and I lost a lot of money." I'll say, "Yeah, I know. I had that happen too, and I know it's painful, right? It hurts." And I said, "I'm just curious. So why did you do that?" And they say, "Well, this guru told me to do that, right? This guru said spend a lot of money on Facebook. I made all this money on Facebook ads. You should spend money on Facebook ads." Well, I did it, and I lost a lot of money. I said, "Yeah, it sucks, man." And I say, "By the way, I'm just curious. So, what were you sending traffic to? When you had these Facebook ads, like, what were you sending traffic to?" And they say, "Well, my website." I say, "Okay, good, that's great. But what is your offer on your website?" They go, "Well, I don't really have my offer yet." And then I go, "Right, facepalm." It's like, and
So he was
it's
sending to his website, but there wasn't offering anything.
there's no offer,
So
right?
what was he expecting to get?
Exactly, right. But see, that's what the gurus do. They just tell you, "Well, I did it, so you got to do it." It's like, So people, sad to say, but blindly follow them, which I did for years too, by the way. So I'm not casting aspersions here. I'm just saying, we've got to pull back the curtain and say, wait a minute, time out. That is the definition of putting the cart before the horse. Right?
Right.
If you're buying traffic, spending money, and you don't really have your offer dialed in yet, you can't do anything but lose money. So just this piece alone could save you tons of money and make you a lot of money. Just this one piece is dialing in your offers. And so that's so important to understand your target audience, to do all of these things, all this research, and it does. It takes time, and it takes asking people, and it takes trial and error. And here's the other thing that I want people to realize. I've been doing this a long time, right? And I've launched so many things. And I will tell people, and this is true, that 9 out of the 10 things that I've launched over the years have failed. 9 out of 10 things that I've launched have failed. But just by succeeding 1 out of 10 times, I've done pretty well. You know, so my job is to help people save that time, money, and effort.
Save
And
the nine.
right, exactly. So that's your seven-figure offers. Then we have seven-figure funnels. So a
Mhm.
funnel is very simply how you sell your offers. So think about it. Your offer is what you sell. How are you going to make money? And then the funnel is how you sell it, right?
Mhm.
So the funnel is your online presence. Now, one of the things that I teach is known as the hub and spoke method. And there's a lot of people that don't teach this. And frankly, a lot of marketers disagree with what I'm about to say. So the hub and spoke method that I teach my clients is you have a hub, which is your main website, right? So noahstjohn.com. That's my hub, right?
Mhm.
And then out of that, you have the spokes. Now, out of the spokes, if you go to noahstjohn.com and you click on my shop, or you click on books, or you click on the different links we have there, well, that's where you can see my different coaching programs, my online programs like Power Habits Academy, like 12-week Breakthrough, and many things like that. And so, why do you need that? Well, the reason is because of two reasons. Number one is called organic traffic,
Mhm.
which is actually the fifth step, which we're going to get to in a second. And the second is called paid traffic. All right. Now, again, notice I'm really transitioning hard into outer game here.
Mhm.
Okay. But paid traffic is very simply you pay money to Facebook, Instagram, Google, YouTube, whatever, these platforms that we have that we all know. You pay them money and then they'll drive traffic. Well, guess what happens when you stop paying them money? They stop sending you traffic. Pretty darn simple, right? But organic is things like Google and YouTube, which is search engines, and Bing and whatever other search engines you want. But that can last forever. And that
Mm-hmm.
can be what's known as free traffic.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I put that in quotations because nothing's free, but that's a whole nother discussion. But anyway, the point is, I firmly believe and have proven many times that when you have a hub like noahstjohn.com, that means you can just have organic traffic going forever that you
Right.
don't pay for.
Right.
And so the reason that I said a moment ago that many marketers disagree with what I'm saying is because they say, hey, you don't need a website. All you need is a funnel. And I'm
Mhm.
like, they're not exactly wrong. I get the point there. But my entire point is what I just said. If you only have a funnel, meaning something, give me money, Google and other search engines are never going to rank you. It is not going to happen because
Right.
they
Right.
hate sales pages. Google hates sales pages.
Right.
They like blogs, they like videos. They want a happy customer experience, which is when somebody types in, how do I do this? How do I do that? Then they have good information, and that is your hub. Okay, so that was a very long explanation of my hub and spoke method, but that is your, really your seven-figure funnels and your seven-figure offers put together.
Did that guy you were working with, did he ever go back and develop an offer?
Which one?
The one that didn't have an offer.
Oh, well, all of them. I mean, when I said that, I mean, that happens more than you think. I
Oh,
mean,
I see.
it's been many, many,
So he
many.
wasn't selling anything at all.
Well, he wasn't clear, and he and she. I mean, it's a lot of people who come
Yeah,
to me,
yeah.
and so it's very common, shall we say? It's more than one person. And
I
so my
see.
point is that, I help that business owner to truly dial in their offers before they start giving money to Facebook, Instagram, and so
Right,
forth.
right.
Because
Get
what
that
the heck
together.
are you doing? Yeah, you've got to put the horse in front of the cart.
Right, 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 right.
And by the way, just to finish that thought, so then of course we go to seven-figure traffic. So that's the final stage of my seven-figure expert formula is the traffic. Okay, so traffic is of course how you get leads. So notice the order of things, right? Yeah. Seven-figure offers, what do you sell? Seven-figure funnels, how do you sell it?
Hmm.
Seven-figure traffic, how do you get your offer in front of the right people without
Hmm.
losing money?
Hmm.
That's a lot harder than you think.
Yeah. So in your book and in your coaching, you're actually assisting people to put all of these structures together, starting with taking out the head trash and
That's
getting
right.
your consciousness together first, because you're
That's
not
right.
going to be able to outrun your consciousness. With
It's
if you have
exactly
all
right.
the
And
how-tos together, but you don't believe in yourself or your
that's right.
product, it's not going to work anyway.
That's exactly right. And that's what every marketer guru is out there doing. Every marketing guru is shoving marketing down our throats. Come on. So they're starting on page 273,
Right.
right? They're like, hey, come on, guys, market, 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 spend money, spend money. And you're like I said at the beginning of this program, you're dealing with a human. 95% of them have a lot of head trash that says, I can't do it. Why don't
Right.
we start on page one
Right.
with
Right.
that?
Right.
And that, quite frankly, is one of the things that makes me different and why we get hockey stick growth for our clients.
Are there any practical steps to assist people in moving from lack mindset to abundance mindset?
Absolutely. I mean, that's a big, big part of my power habit system. So, one thing that everybody can do today, right away, is start a gratitude journal.
Hmm.
Okay. And I'm sure we've all heard that, but many people have heard it, but don't do it.
Right.
Right. So, gratitude is the parent of all virtues.
Right.
And, going back to my origin story, I grew up poor in a rich neighborhood. And all I heard every day from my parents is, we don't have any money. We don't have any money. We're poor, poor us, blah, 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 blah. Right. So that was ingrained in me that I'll never have money. I'll never be enough. And going to the Catholic Church, I learned I'm never enough. I'm never going to be enough. So I had it both ways of, head trash from my family and head trash from the church. Yeah, it was
Right.
really fun. Why do you think I decided to take my own life at 25?
Right.
And so the point is that I, being grateful, having that attitude of gratitude that a lot of people talk about, but that few people do, is a very conscious habit. It's a very conscious, at least it is for me. Now, I happen to marry a woman who is always happy and always grateful. That's one of the reasons I married her.
Mm-hmm.
because I had actually never met anyone as loving as her. And
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you a funny story. When I was, I had been in business for 10 years and lost everything and had to move back into my parents' house. And it was awful. I was $40,000 in debt. It was just terrible because I listened to all these marketing gurus, by the way,
Mm-hmm.
and they got a lot of bad advice. So I said, you know what? I've got to make a list of what do I want in my dream woman? What do I want? Because here I am teaching people how to do this, and I didn't do it. I'm like, duh, come on, man. So I wrote it down. I said, I want her to be beautiful and blonde, gorgeous figure. She's got to be smart and really business savvy. And these are the key things. And I said, I want her to have no tattoos. She can't drink alcohol, doesn't smoke, and this was the kicker. She can't drink coffee. She can't drink coffee because I don't drink coffee. I don't smoke, drink, or and I don't like tattoos. And I wrote that list, and I literally said to myself, and this is true. I said, "This is impossible. You are never going to find this woman. This is impossible." And then through a series of events, I moved here to Ohio. 3 weeks after I moved here, I met the woman who would be my wife, and she checks every box. I'm like, are you kidding me right now? So I want people to realize, and that came from having that gratitude. And even when I didn't believe it, it happened. So if it works for me, it can work for anybody.
Did she get her tattoo yet?
Not a chance. Not a chance.
She's
Not
not
happening.
into it.
Not happening, man.
She doesn't
Not.
drink coffee.
No, no coffee. That was so key. It was so key. I said, and I literally said, "That's impossible. You can't find a woman in America who doesn't drink coffee." Forget it. I found her. She doesn't like tea. She drinks tea. I'm like, tea is fine. Tea's fine.
Yeah,
No
tea's
problem
fine.
with tea.
Yeah, that's
I got
okay.
no problem with tea.
Okay. So what do you do when to take back your mind? When you're faced with the challenge, what is your go-to movement to get your mind back, to get you open up your heart and to get your mind back?
When we humans experience loss, we feel pain.
Mhm.
Like sadly, my wife's mom just passed away recently, so that
Mhm.
was a huge loss, for the family. So what we have to do whenever, and of course, I lost tens of thousands of dollars, so I've lost money, I've lost friendships and things like that. We've all lost things, right? I mean, everybody. It's a human condition, part of the human condition. So when we feel loss, we feel pain, we feel sadness. So it is incumbent upon each of us to consciously, in that period of loss, to as quickly as possible move to a state of gratitude, move to a
Mhm.
state of what did I gain from this experience? Now, that's really easier said than done. That's really hard, right? Especially when it's, someone close to you or things like that.
Right.
But we always have to, that's how I take back my mind is finding that gratitude. What am I grateful for right now? Even, if I lost everything, what am I grateful for right now? That's one of the ways that I take back my mind.
Beautiful. Yeah, gratitude is the great clearing of our perceptions that we may receive all the good that's trying to pour through us.
Precisely.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I see what you're doing. You're a business practitioner cleaning out the head trash, allowing people to come into a greater understanding, a greater awareness of who they really are without all the programming. And then you give them the outer work of how to actually allow this, they are the funnel, how to allow this great cosmic energy to flow through them in this feeling tone of abundance through these particular channels.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
Right.
you put both inner and outer together,
Yes, sir. That's correct.
and then success is repeatable.
Precisely. Exactly.
Outstanding. Anything else that comes to mind that you want to say that you didn't say during our time together?
I just want to remind people that when you go to sevenfigureexpertbook.com, you can get the book for free, and along with over $700 of free bonus gifts, and just cover the shipping. So it's sevenfigureexpertbook.com. By the way, if you want to talk to me or one of my coaches, just go to breakthroughwithnoah.com. That's easy to remember, right? I'm
Yeah.
known as the Breakthrough Coach. So breakthroughwithnoah.com, and just select a time and just answer a few questions, and we'll do a complimentary 15-minute business evaluation and business breakthrough for you. And you'll walk away with a 3-step plan of exactly how you can break through, just like the other clients that I've talked to you about and many, many more. So that's
Outstanding.
breakthroughwithnoah.com.
One last question. Did your parents live long enough for you to see you breaking through the poverty ceiling?
They are still here. And I was actually just in Maine visiting them actually, I had my 40th high school reunion. back
Uh-huh.
in Kennebunkport. And I was driving around with my wife, and I was looking around, and I was like, wow, this is a very wealthy area, isn't it? I'm like, this isn't the top 1%. This is top 0.1%. I'm like, whoa, I lived here. I mean, this is how I grew up. And I didn't, you know how when you grow up, you're like, you don't even really notice.
Right, right,
I was like,
right,
holy cow, these people are very rich,
right.
so that's what I grew up with, even although I was on the wrong side of the tracks. But it's pretty nice to go back after 40 years with my beautiful wife and say, hey, look, I made something myself. It's pretty nice.
Right, right. Beautiful. And their parents have seen you break through.
Yes, sir.
Hmm. Beautiful. Noah, thank you so much for your time, man. I know
Absolutely. My
plant
pleasure.
you planted a lot of seeds here with a lot of these people, and I absolutely appreciate you. And thank you for bringing me back to Mark, Reverend Mark, and the North Hollywood Church. That's a great memory as well.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. I think that's it. Other than you have what's your website?
Well, my main website is noahstjohn.com. That's the
Okay,
main one
very
uh,
good.
that you can go
I'm at
to. But like I mentioned, the breakthroughwithnoah.com, that's where people can book a breakthrough consultation, or just my main website, noahstjohn.com.
very good. God bless you. Hey,
Thank you.
everyone, this is Dr. Noah St. John. You can have a tremendous breakthrough with him, and I know you appreciated all the nuggets that he threw out. Have a beautiful day, everyone.
Congratulations for watching this powerful interview. If this conversation resonated with you, and if you're ready to finally take out the head trash and get your foot off the brake, go to donewithheadtrash.com, because this is your time to get clear, get focused, and start living the life that you've always dreamed of. And hey, if you got value from this episode, remember to like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Until next time, this is Dr. Noah St. John, and I look forward to being a part of your success story.